Belief states and epistemic distinctions. The importance of Proposition P. Proposition P is significant because different kinds of propositions require different epistemic approaches. The distinction between positive belief, negative belief, and non-belief varies depending on the nature of P. Types of propositions and their epistemic treatment. Analytic truths. Analytic truths are necessarily true by definition, and denying them is irrational. For example, all bachelors are unmarried. Disbelieving an analytic truth requires either rejecting the underlying logic or using a different definition of key terms. In such cases, interlocutors should first establish a consensus on definitions before proceeding with further discussion. In the example proposed by the author of the post, let us consider an analytic truth. Given the presuppositions that the machine is functioning correctly and that it can only output either a Boolean 1 or a Boolean 0, the statement either the next output will be 1, or it won't is necessarily true. This is a tautology based on the presuppositions, and I would gladly accept it if the author does the same. If not, several other analogies express the same idea, such as either the coin landed on heads, or it didn't. This galaxy contains an even number of stars, or it doesn't. Trivial and empirical truths. When Proposition P is a trivial claim, such as some cats have tails, this is an obvious but contingent truth. It depends on empirical facts and therefore can never be an analytic truth. Disbelief in a trivial truth is uncommon, and lacking belief is still possible if one is unaware of the fact. For example, someone unfamiliar with cats might neither believe nor disbelieve the claim. Conversely, empirical truths are subject to evidence and testing. Positive or negative belief depends on investigation. One can rationally suspend judgment if they lack sufficient evidence. Consider the claim, water boils at 100 degrees Celsius at sea level. Someone unfamiliar with physics might neither believe nor disbelieve this claim. Theoretical claims. Theoretical claims are often speculative and unverifiable. A rational person may lack belief without holding a negative belief. Non-belief is a valid position, distinct from positive or negative belief. In summary, the nature of Proposition P determines what it means to positively believe, negatively believe, or to withhold judgment. Flaws in the proposed analogy. The analogy as presented is flawed. The framing is asymmetrical and subtly biased towards conflating negative belief and non-belief. Subjects A and B have their positions explicitly stated as claims, whereas subjects C and D have their beliefs presented but not their assertions. To maintain consistency in expressing different epistemic states, we should solicit the belief claims of all subjects explicitly. Additionally, the way the analogy is framed creates ambiguity as to whether the four subjects are distinct individuals. To be consistent, we should explicitly define them as separate people with distinct names: Adam, Beth, Charles, and Dan. Constructing a clearer framework. Let us say that we have constructed a machine that will produce Boolean values 1 or 0. The following subjects are computer scientists with knowledge of Boolean logic and machine computation. Each is asked what they believe the current result of the machine is, without being shown the screen. Adam says, "I believe the result is 0. Beth says, "I believe the result is 1. Charles says, "I believe the result is 1, but I acknowledge I might be wrong." Dan says, "I do not believe 0. Adam and Beth are expressing beliefs about the Boolean result currently on the screen, though they have not seen it. Their reasoning does not matter, only that they are expressing a belief. Adam might assume a pattern in previous outputs, while Beth could have deeper understanding of the machine's algorithm. Charles is also asserting a belief but with epistemic humility. He publicly asserts his belief while acknowledging uncertainty, distinguishing his position from Adam's and Beth's in terms of confidence rather than content. Dan's statement is more ambiguous because it only negates one belief without affirming another. To illustrate this distinction, let us introduce Dan's twin brother, Davis, who makes a related but distinct claim. Dan restates, "I do not believe 0, and I do not believe 1. Davis says, "I do not believe 0, and I do believe 1. Dan and Davis clearly hold distinct positions. Dan's stance is non-belief, which can be publicly asserted without contradiction. His lack of belief in both propositions differentiates him from Davis, who explicitly affirms belief in one while rejecting belief in zero. It is important to note that Davis's reasoning is not a logical necessity but rather his own epistemic stance. After clarifying these distinctions, we can express the different belief states available to our computer scientists as follows. Adam, B, 0. Believes the result is 0. Beth, B, 1. Believes the result is 1. Charles, B, 1, and not K, 1. Believes 1 but acknowledges uncertainty, no knowledge claim. Dan, not B, 0, and not B, 1. Lacks belief in both 0 and 1, non-belief. The inconsistency in the author's position. The author assumes that only knowledge claims allow for clear identification, yet belief states can be just as explicitly reported. This principle is widely accepted in epistemology, where self-reports of belief are commonly considered valid evidence of one's stance. If Adam and Beth's assertions are sufficient to identify them, then Charles and Dan's statements about their beliefs should also be sufficient. Moreover, the author inconsistently accepts self-reports for some while rejecting them for others. If belief states require independent verification, this skepticism should apply to Adam and Beth as well. Conversely, if self-reports are valid, then Charles and Dan can be distinguished just as easily, simply by asking what they believe. There is no paradox here. Charles can report, I believe 1 but may be wrong, while Dan can state, I do not believe 0 or 1. These positions are logically distinct and self-reported without contradiction. The only issue arises from arbitrarily rejecting their testimony. The false dichotomy and its implications. By rejecting non-belief as a distinct position, the author forces a false dichotomy between belief and disbelief, arbitrarily dismissing the idea that someone can rationally withhold belief. This ultimately collapses into solipsistic reasoning, where only the author's epistemic framing is accepted, and alternative conceptual distinctions are discarded without justification. Conclusion. The assertion that non-belief is indistinguishable from belief to the contrary fails under scrutiny. Non-belief is a coherent, independently reportable position distinct from positive or negative belief. The attempt to conflate it with disbelief relies on an arbitrary epistemic standard that is inconsistently applied. Once this inconsistency is exposed, the analogy falls apart, and the purported paradox dissolves. Postscript. The author of the post has continued to make edits, which I have no comment on at this time. His contention with atheists and flat earth is his own to bear, I am here for the argument. If he provides sources to support his claims, I welcome them. However, after reading Popper, Eyre, Alston, Hume, Clifford, and others he has referenced, I find that these sources either fail to support or outright contradict his premise. The author is not engaging seriously with the material.